Hi everyone. I wanted to make another follow-up to my initial video about the coronavirus, and this particular announcement has to do with social distancing, but specifically the fact that social distancing includes sex. And the reason I thought about making this just now is that I was watching a live stream by a Twitch streamer, the Spud Hunter, who was talking about how he was recently in the singles department, and in light of the virus and all of these other things that are going on in Australia where he lives, he thought it would be a really good idea for him to go out and mingle with the ladies. And I want to say that the sentiment for that is totally understandable. I was interacting with various people and having a good time, and then it all kind of fell apart a couple of days ago, for instance. And that's pretty normal with online stuff. It doesn't always last forever on Kick and Reddit and FetLife and places like that where you can go and sort of hook up. I mean, that's kind of the nature of websites like that. It's casual, or even more casual than casual. Something like a hookup website is really discouraging anonymity and meeting people just to have sex with them, and then you never see them again. So you hit it and quit it, basically. And under normal circumstances, that kind of behavior is acceptable, provided people are health conscious. They're not spreading normal diseases, and they're using protection and good sense and things like that. But in light of the virus, where you can catch a disease merely by being close to someone, the droplets of water from your breath, coming from your mouth or your eye sockets, your tear ducts specifically, things like that, you can be exposed to that just by being close to someone, let alone having sex with them and kissing and all of the things that occur during sex that involve close contact, close physical contact. The odds of you becoming infected are high enough if you're within 6 feet of someone, let alone if you're doing all of that stuff. And people right now, like the Spud Hunter, but also myself, are feeling the pressure of this situation, and what we want to do is go out and find something to take the edge off. That's how the world works. You have an itch that you want to scratch for a particular reason, stress, all of these different things that are going on in the news that you're hearing about are stressing people out, but also just the reality of the situation. A lot of people are not really equipped to handle quarantine mentally. They want to go out and they want to be with other people. And unfortunately, a large part of social distancing, again, is not being close to people, and this includes sexually. And I think a lot of people, when they're practicing behaviors like this under normal circumstances, there is a fair amount of anonymity and going from one partner to the next. And under normal circumstances, that's tolerable, provided people use good sense. I'll say that again. But in this kind of situation, it's actually dangerous to be doing that. It's not a good idea, and I would encourage people to find alternatives to actual sexual encounters where, okay, you meet up with someone and you physically have sex with them. It's not a good idea right now, because even though it's going to feel good, you're going to have sex and an orgasm, and okay, that's good and that's great. At the same time, you're going to really increase the odds that the person you're with and yourself are going to get infected. If either of you have been exposed, the other person is more than likely going to get sick. And if you're going from person to person doing this, and you're going out and conducting this kind of behavior over and over, and you're being somewhat clandestine about it, stealthy, because under normal circumstances, this isn't the kind of thing that people normally advertise. Oh, I went out and had a one-night stand. Now me, I'm poly, and I'm completely comfortable with that type of behavior so long as everyone is an adult. But again, it's in a normal situation, not a situation where if you're within 6 feet of someone or you breathe on them even, you can catch the virus, which is why following the quarantine is so important. And this includes not going out and minimizing physical contact with other people. Now, uh, it's hard because there is a facet to this quarantine that I think people are going to have difficulty following, which is having sex in general. So if you and your partner are in quarantine together, there comes a point where you're still going to have to go out. And if someone goes out to get groceries or resupply in some shape or form, be it gasoline or water or food or going to the bank to make a deposit, what have you, there's a chance that they could get sick. And when they go back to the house, they could potentially spread the disease to their partner. And I think there are certain risks that people are going to take sexually within their own domiciles, and that's understandable. It's like, all right, but I would encourage even then to practice a certain amount of good sense and perhaps try things that encourage a bit of distance. I mean, it's entirely possible when you're having sex with someone else to masturbate in front of them as opposed to within 6 feet or further away. I mean, that's possible. And if you have a long distance relationship, try sexting or try having cam sex or something like that, because that automatically puts the distance between you and your partner. You can't touch them physically, but you can stimulate each other visually and orally or sonically, so you can still have something that it's not quite as good as actual sex, but it's much safer. And I would encourage a lot of people, everyone, to be doing this as much as possible. And even people who are living under the same roof should perhaps be following this right now, just in light of things. You say, oh, well, wash your hands, cough into your elbow, things like that, while also practice forms of sexual activity that encourage physical distance. And it's entirely possible. I mean, sex toys exist for a reason, to help slow the spread of disease. And this is something that partners can practice under the same roof, but also over the internet. And trying things like that, I would strongly recommend as a form of social distancing to improve the odds that the quarantine is going to work. And it's difficult, of course, because people are going to be fighting their sexual urges right now under times of duress in light of the quarantine. And a lot of people aren't really equipped for that type of self-isolating, that type of social limiting, where they aren't used to being cooped up and they're not used to communicating in that particular way. Now, me personally, I have a lot of experience with that. I tend to keep to myself. I do most of my communicating with my friends online through the written word, but also in sexual encounters, either through the written word or so sexting, but also cam sex and things like that. I have a lot of experience with that. I also have experience with actual physical sex, but at the moment, I too am in the framing business, to quote Kevin Smith in Mallrats. And in light of that, I've had to deal, even before the pandemic, finding ways to, as someone who is an introvert, finding ways to have sex and get my jollies off. And I've found that that's actually quite useful in our current situation where people have to self-isolate. You have to be able to communicate with people via the internet. And for me, being a writer and an erotic artist, and I have just a lot of dating experience or sexual experience online for years, I feel totally okay for the most part. I mean, yeah, I still have sexual urges and I still want to go out and hook up and things like that, but I can't. And I don't think anyone should be doing that right now. And even, again, couples should be thinking of other ways to gratify each other sexually that don't involve rubbing their bodies up against each other. Because if you get sick And it's not that we want to avoid getting sick altogether, but to stagger it in such a way that people don't get sick all at once. The more people who get sick over an extended period of time, that means more people are being exposed to the virus gradually, and they're not going to overwhelm the healthcare systems in place in their respective countries. And that's the goal of the quarantine. It's not to prevent people from getting sick forever. It's not really possible, and it doesn't work that way with any other disease that is out there. When there's a flu season, they encourage things that negate the possibility of people getting sick all at once, like getting a flu shot, but also just, again, the same types of things that they recommend during a pandemic. It's a quarantine in this case just because there aren't certain measures in place that are going to prevent the spread of the disease in other ways. So that's why the quarantine is going on. So that's the point of this video. Social distancing includes sex. So if you're sexually active, which I realize most people are, and if you're feeling the itch, which most people are going to be feeling right now, that's perhaps not the best way to put it, but use some good sense. Masturbation, sex toys, sexting, or cam sex, things like that put a buffer between you and your partner. Try stuff like that out. Try long distance or self-sex, things like that, or forms of sexual activity with another person that allow you to work from a distance. And trust me, it's not as good as the actual thing, but it can, in situations like this, help save lives. So more than ever. And it's, unfortunately, historically, I think people don't have a lot of good sense when it comes to that kind of thing, because what's another way to help stop preventing diseases from spreading, sexual diseases? Wearing condoms. Well, a lot of people have these beliefs about condoms. They make the sex feel not quite as good, and that might debatably be true. I'm going to have to agree with them on that. I think that condoms do kind of make it feel different. Let's put it that way. It makes it feel different in ways that's not for everyone, but it does help prevent the spread of diseases. So during, say, the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s, a lot of people probably have problems wearing condoms, and people have always had problems wearing condoms. Nobody likes it because it does put a barrier between you and your partner. You want to experience that physical sensation of your bodies touching in sensitive areas. I mean, that's what sex is all about, that physical intimacy, the rubbing, the touching, all of that. And if people can't be arsed to wear condoms, it seems like a tall order to ask them to stay more than 6 feet away from each other, or not even touch each other during sex. But it is an activity that you can learn, and it is something that I think a lot of people are going to have to come to grips with, because if you go out and have sex with someone, is that sex worth it if it could be the last time you have sex? Now, the romantically inclined might say yes, but it's not going to be what you think. It's not going to be Tyrion in Game of Thrones saying, when I die, I want it to be with a 20-year-old girl, a belly full of wine, and a girl's mouth around my cock. It's not going to be like that, okay? You're going to have sex, then you're going to go home, and then 2 weeks later, you're going to die ignominiously, the ignominious death, right? You don't want that. So is the sex really worth it in hindsight? Because that's how it's going to go down if you get sick and if someone dies. And it's not just going to be you, it's going to be people around you, and you're risking other people's lives for your own sexual gratification when you could be sexually gratifying yourself and other people. You want to be considerate of your partner's needs as well in this. You could be doing all of that without risking other people's lives and still be having pretty good sex. The irony is that a lot of people aren't well versed in this type of sexuality. This type of sexual activity is something that is kind of alien to a lot of people. Role playing or sexting, writing back and forth stories. A lot of people don't have the command of their written language to be able to do that, because it is a skill. It's like anything else. If you're writing about anything, you have to practice doing it. And people are going to have to learn if this quarantine goes on for an extended period, which it should, because the cure isn't going to be out for another year at least. The expectation that this quarantine is only going to be lasting for 2 weeks is foolhardy. It's a delusion. No, this quarantine is going to be going on for an extended period, which means people are going to have to adapt to that quarantine sexually. And they're not going to want to do it any more than people want to wear condoms or take birth control or abstain. And I don't think abstinence is necessary. It's entirely possible within the quarantine to be able to experience a healthy sexual life, but you are going to have to adapt for your sake and for the sake of other people, which is how you should be thinking anyways. You should always be conscious of the other person's needs, but also their sexual health when engaging with them. And historically, there are plenty of people who don't tell their partner about some disease they have. And in this case, that disease might be the coronavirus. So keep that in mind if you are thinking about going and having sex with someone. You're taking a risk. And if you're thinking about taking that risk, don't. Not right now. Instead, talk to your partner, and this is something that people also have to become accustomed to nowadays, is communicating with the person that you want to have sex with. And unfortunately, that does require a certain amount of intimacy. You can't just go around having sex with whoever now and having one-night stands. No names. Shh, don't tell me your name. Tell the person your name. Make sure you know who they are. Make sure you know that you're healthy and that they're healthy and that the sex that you're having is going to ensure that you both stay healthy as well as happy. So I just wanted to sort of release that, and again, stay smart, people. A quarantine only works so long as we enforce it. The moment you break quarantine, the risk of infection goes up, and you have to realize that your body is a vector for the spread of the disease, including your private parts. And we don't like to think of it like that. It kind of ruins the mood, if you will. Oh, my dick is a vector for coronavirus, or her pussy. And it's like, well, unfortunately, them's the breaks. And that's the reality of regular sex, too. But in this case, it's augmented by the fact that we have the potential to spread a incredibly contagious disease without even really getting to the good stuff. But if you do get to the good stuff, the odds only skyrocket that you're going to get sick. And you really have to know your other partner really well. And even then, it's always going to be a calculated risk. So with that, I'm going to cut the video short, but stay safe, people. Do the 5. Be smart sexually, make sound decisions, and try and abstain from having actual sex right now. Even if you're with someone that you know and trust, you can't account for all of their behavior, and they can't account for yours, and this is a very contagious disease. So, yeah, stay safe, and Godspeed.